This video will show you how to replace your front outer tie rod end on this Toyota Corolla. This is part of your front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the front wheel's off the ground. After you've done that, we're going to remove all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a clear view of our inner and outer tie rod ends. We're going to start right in the center here at the jam nut. To loosen this jam nut, you can use a 22mm wrench, or you can use some long pliers. I'm going to be using some long pliers for leverage. We'll grab onto that jam nut. I'm going to be turning this clockwise. Now, once you find that you do have movement in between the jam nut and the outer tie rod end, let's focus on the outboard side of the tie rod end where it connects to our steering knuckle next. Commonly on these outer tie rod end nuts, you're going to find that it's a castle nut, and if that's the case, it's also going to have a locking cotter pin, which needs to be removed. Let's see if I can get some movement from this. We might just have to break it off. Yeah, that one's stuck in there. We'll just remove as much of this as possible and we'll continue on with our 17mm socket. A quick inspection of that. We're going to start it back on here, just a couple threads. Now continuing on, if you have a tie rod separator tool, you can use that. Most people don't have something like that. If that's the case, use some penetrant and tap along the steering knuckle with a hammer. The vibration should break this free. The nut is preventing this from falling and potentially hurting us. Now that we have that broken free, we can remove that tie rod end. We can start removing the outer tie rod end from the inner tie rod end. Commonly, you can take hold of the outer tie rod end and turn it counterclockwise to remove it. It's going to unscrew. You're going to want to count the amount of turns it takes to remove it, so during the installation process, we can reinstall it the same amount of turns. On this one in particular, it's rusted in position, so I'm going to be holding the inner tie rod end with some locking pliers. Now that I have my pliers on there, I'm going to continue on with a 12mm socket. I'm just going to slide it right over the stud here, and I'm using an extension for leverage. We should be able to start turning that outer tie rod end. There's 1 turn, 2 turns, and so on. 3, 4. Let's just give this a quick inspection and we'll set it aside. Now I got 14 turns on my outer tie rod end. Your results may vary. Now we can remove that jam nut. For this, I'm going to be using a 22mm socket on my air gun. We're going to take some anti-seize and put it right on the threads here. Now it's time for our jam nut. We'll bring this onto the inner tie rod end, screw it down approximately halfway. Some copper anti-seize on this area of the threaded portion. Now it's time to install the outer tie rod end. Now it's time to install our brand new outer tie rod end. When we install the outer tie rod end, we want to make sure we turn it in the same amount of turns as it took to remove the outer tie rod end in the first place. There's 1, 2, and so on. Now let's bring the outer tie rod end over towards the steering knuckle. Now we can start on our outer tie rod end mounting nut. Snug it, torque this to 36 foot-pounds. Once you have that nut snug, the next thing that you have to do is pay attention to the slots in the mounting nut in comparison to the port on the stud. They need to align so we can put in a locking cotter pin. If they're not, continue tightening the nut until the very next slot is. After that, install that cotter pin. Now when we go to tighten this jam nut, We're going to be turning it counterclockwise, bringing it up against the outer tie rod end. We'll hold the outer tie rod end still while we tighten that jam nut with our 22 millimeter. Let's get our wheel in place. Now at this point, we're going to start on all 5 of our 21 millimeter lug nuts. We'll bottom them out, get the wheels safely on the ground, and we can torque these to 76 foot-pounds. With the wheel back on the ground, let's torque each one of our 21 millimeter lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friend, we finished our installation. Go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test, listen for any odd noises, and get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.